Democrats just lost everything. They control nothing. They control, I mean, they don't control the House. They don't control the Senate. They don't control the White House, and they don't control the Supreme Court. So now is the time to break some, right? And break some China.
They do control the email lists that continue to ask for money.
Well, that's true.
They still have that.
We're in a constitutional crisis, and we very well may be. I'm not trying to downplay that reality. When you have a president, which seems to be what's happening, and an administration who are defying a court order, that is ignoring the one branch of government, that is technically, I think as lawyers would define it, a constitutional crisis. Right.
Well, then through an appeal
could be.
We're a little bit down the road, but
yes. A road to a constitutional crisis. Okay. How's that? Okay. That's what a press secretary does.
The road to constitutional crisis. Boy, if that's not a title of a Rachel Maddow special, I don't know what is.
Well, there may be.
Boy. So once again, we got to talk about the failing Democrat Party, okay? Because they are in shambles right now, and they're trying to figure out what to do, okay? So they're at the point where they're having these conversations with Jon Stewart, somebody that some progressives say should run for president, right? They want Jon Stewart to be the Democrat Party nominee.
Boy, I highly recommend you go follow the Jon Stewart 2028 account on Twitter. Somebody made an account where they're like really pushing for Jon Stewart to be the Democratic nominee. And I'm certainly in favor of that. That's my pick. And let's build some momentum for it. Go follow that account. They tweet funny stuff all the time. There's a theory out there that it's me running it. It is not me running it. I stumbled across it one day just like everybody else, and I started retweeting it. But anyway, man, we're staring in the abyss, right? We are staring in the abyss as we speak. Where, in the opposition part, they're not fighting enough. They're not fighting enough. The Democrats are not fighting.
Yeah, so the biggest problem with the Democrat Party is not only are they too far left, especially on social issues, but also on top of that, they're just so delusional as a party that they don't even realize that they're too far left, okay? And I think one of the examples that I want to point out of what I'm talking about here is Jen Psaki, who did an interview with Jon Stewart. And boy, I gotta tell you, it is actually comedy listening to the delusion of Jen Psaki, okay? Because this woman is completely out of touch with reality, but she represents the standard establishment Democrat that is living in the DC bubble, right? And you can tell in this interview that this woman does not touch grass very often. She knows absolutely nothing about the real world, right? Like, for example, she believes that Fox News is a right-wing echo chamber, right? But somehow MSNBC is not a left-wing echo chamber for Democrats, and that they're fair and balanced, but Fox News is not. Take a look.
You're at MSNBC. Do they come to you every day and go, here's what we think is important preserve and fight for whatever.
No, everybody gets a zillion press releases and pitch calls, but no.
No. I'm talking about the head of it.
Oh, no. You determine, we determine, each of us for our shows, here's what I'm going to cover today, and here's what I'm going to talk about, and here's what I think is important, which there's an independence-ish of that. And there also is, you're not waiting to be told what to say about anything. You're going to say what you think. So people can trust that, and that is a good thing.
See, I disagree with that. I think it's not that you're able to be independent. It's that you're then a prisoner purely to the minute by minutes. Purely
you mean in terms of ratings?
The ratings, incentives, and all those other things. If you don't have the ideological component, right, then you don't have a governing authority of editorial authority, right? The greatest trick Roger Ailes ever played was he delegitimized editorial authority while exercising absolute steel trapdoor editorial authority.
The greatest thing he did, because it led them to be an arm piece, a mouthpiece of the right wing. It
led them to be exactly what he wanted it to be, which is an effective expression of his worldview.
And MSNBC, I am unburdened by not having, I can share whatever I think. I have obviously worked in Democratic politics for 20 years. I don't hide anything about that. It is a progressive leaning network. But nobody is, to the frustration at times of many elected Democrats, it is not a mouthpiece of the Democratic Party.
Yeah. MSNBC is not a mouthpiece of the Democrat Party, according to Jen Psaki, who quite literally was a mouthpiece for the Democrat Party, who got a job at MSNBC because she was a mouthpiece of the Democrat Party. And on her show, she essentially just pushes talking points and propaganda on behalf of the Democrat Party, just like the rest of the network, right? Again. But according to her, MSNBC is not a mouthpiece of the Democrat Party. This is the same network that said that if you believe that Joe Biden isn't the sharpest that he's ever been, then F you, okay? But not a mouthpiece of the Democrat Party, right? This is the same network that's battled every conspiracy of the Democrat Party out there, but not a mouthpiece of the Democrat Party. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. The delusion is off the charts, but it doesn't stop there, right? It doesn't stop there. Jen Psaki is so delusional that at points in this interview, Jon Stewart had to correct her, had to check her on her delusion. Like, for example, Jen Psaki also claimed that Joe Rogan and Theo Von are a part of the right-wing ecosystem. Take a look.
In 4 hours of Joe Scarborough shouldn't be allowed in this country. and then like Rachel Maddow, like it's schizophrenic at times. Like, yeah, I do think there should be some semblance of an idea that, look, they're kicking progressive ass right now. And if progressives don't organize their media, their think tanks and all that, it's going to continue to happen. It's chaos.
Well, I will say, broadly speaking, what I'm not going to say Democrats, I'm going to say people on the left do not do that the right does very well is support within the system each other. I'm serious. Like, and what I mean by this is this, right?
Yeah.
Theo Von appears on Joe Rogan's show, right? He promotes what Joe Rogan's doing, but they all promote all of the things each other are doing and what the elected officials, I guess, are doing too. And the left is a little bit more kind of discombobulated in terms of supporting the different entities on the left. There is not a left ecosystem that matches the right ecosystem.
But Ailes didn't do that either. It was the principle, the ideological principles, not the party. He and Murdoch the same way. They're promoting an ideological worldview, right? That they believe is correct. And Theo Von and Joe Rogan, I think, are different animals than any of this. Like, I wouldn't say I don't think they're part of any machine.
Don't you think they're but they are still in the right wing ecosystem? Wouldn't you agree?
No, I would think they're in. No, I would consider them in a more probably libertarian comedic complex, more along the lines of, and if you watch or listen to their shows, a lot of times it's just pure like goofing off.
Has nothing to do with politics, and oftentimes, but
almost entirely.
But they are supportive of the Trump enterprise, is what I mean. So maybe I'm loosely putting them in that category.
I think they are supportive, but not. They are not relentless in the Trump enterprise. Like, they are not Charlie Kirk. They are not Ben Shapiro. Like, they are very different animals. They are not invested in the shit that you get picked up and like go to the headlines of media. But on balance, that's not what their shows are about.
Hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. Jen Psaki is so clueless. She doesn't know anything at all. She knows absolutely nothing. This is the quintessential establishment Democrat living in a bubble, right? The DC bubble, where they think that Joe Rogan and Theo Von are right wing, right? They're hardcore Trumpers, right? That's only something that somebody who, again, just lives in a liberal, East Coast elite bubble, that is what they think, right? Nobody that lives outside that bubble thinks that Joe Rogan is right wing or some type of staunch Trump supporter. He's really not, right? I mean, again, I think that in today's politics, Joe Rogan aligns more with the right due to the fact that the left has went too far left, right? Because the Democrat Party has shifted so far to the left that you've pushed people like Joe Rogan, who supported Bernie before. Okay, just a few years ago, the dude was a Bernie supporter. You've pushed people like him who have more libertarian leanings on things. You've pushed them over into the right, and they say, well, they're right wingers, right? They're Trump supporters, and that's just simply kind of not the case. Yes, Joe Rogan came out and he eventually endorsed Trump, but he had to be dragged to do it, right? You can tell it wasn't really something that he wanted to do, right? Otherwise, he would have did it a long time ago. But again, only in these liberal elite circles do you consider people like Joe Rogan and Theo to be hardcore MAGA Trump loyalists. Like, it's ridiculous, right? Even Jon Stewart had to, again, correct Jen Psaki on that and say, no, you're just not right, right? Like, that's just incorrect. But here's the most delusional part of the interview that I want to share with you guys. Is when Jon Stewart asked Jen Psaki about whether or not the Democrat Party is principled.
This was actually one of the things in the weeks after the election where I felt like it wasn't that I was shocked out of my mind that Trump won. I mean, I've been in politics, I've traveled around the country, but how did this happen and why did this happen and what can be learned from it, which I think is pivotal to understanding in order to figure out how to move forward, which I think is the point, is part of what I'm hearing from what you're saying. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there's one answer. And I know that there are efforts in different places to explore that question. I think the DNC is doing one. I don't know what will come out of that. I'm keeping my expectations low. But that's sort of, to me, it is a multitude of things. It is how the Democrats are communicating about issues, but it's also, maybe it's a policy question too, and let's not all just call it a messaging issue, because it may not just be a messaging issue. Mm-hmm. It's misinformation and disinformation, and that's not just, everybody shorthands this as, if Democrats only appeared on Joe Rogan's podcast. I'm like, I'm not sure. I don't know that he's inviting many, maybe he is, but that's not the only answer. I think there's a lot of layers of it. It's also the kind of candidates people run. That's not a hack on Kamala Harris. I mean, in different races as well. And sometimes there have been purity tests in the Democratic Party that aren't particularly constructive. The purity test should be, can you win? And will you be a part of the caucus? Because the majority helps make things happen. I don't have an answer yet, but this is the thing that I want to explore.
Do you think the Democratic Party is principled?
I do think that, and sometimes I don't want to say too principled because that is not a good thing to say. Mm-hmm. But I think principled, yes. The Democratic Party writ large are defenders of institutions that make the country run, the rule of law. This is part of the problem, right?
Right.
They are believers in the separation of government.
Here's where we're getting into it. So I think other people would say that's a veneer. And that what Donald Trump is doing is he's actually explicitly exposing the dark heart of how the world actually works.
Yeah, so you've seen that, you heard that, okay? Delusion off the charts. First and foremost, Jen Psaki claims that Democrats lost because of misinformation / disinformation.
The president has said, and you have tweeted, that allegations of wrongdoing based on files pulled from Hunter Biden's laptop are Russian disinformation. There is a new book by a Politico reporter that finds some of the files on there are genuine. Is the White House still going with Russian disinformation?
I think it's broadly known and widely known, Peter, that there was a broad range of Russian disinformation back in 2020.
Okay.
You know, they're not in touch with reality. So Jen Psaki claims that the Democrat Party is principled. They're a principled party. Okay. The same people that were boohoo-whining, crying about democracy and how much they love democracy, that decided not to use democracy anytime they have an election, right? Like any primary, there is no democracy in the Democrat Party, right? There was no democracy when it came to Joe Biden's primary, right? In which Democrats went out of their way to use lawfare to keep other people off the ballot from challenging Joe Biden. Then they lied about Joe Biden and his mental condition, his mental deterioration, and then turned around and replaced them once they couldn't lie about it anymore with Kamala Harris, who nobody voted for, by the way, right? They basically said, screw democracy. We're going to install our own candidate and go from there. This is the same party that openly called to defy court orders that they don't agree with. In fact, they have advocated numerous times to overthrow the Supreme Court, right? To stack the Supreme Court due to the fact that the Supreme Court didn't agree with Joe Biden and the Democrats. And here's the kicker. Here's the one that really gets me, right? It's this idea that the Democrats stand for the rule of law, right? Which, you know, Jen Psaki was the same individual that was glazing Joe Biden when he initially lied to the American people and claimed that he would not pardon his son, Hunter. Take a look.
That I'm not going to do anything. I said I abide by the jury decision, and I will do that, and I will not pardon him.
I can't emphasize enough from knowing him how hard that second half must have been for him to say. I mean, Joe Biden is a person who answers his phone every time any of his grandchildren call, anytime, doesn't matter what's going on. He does the things your grandparents do. When they pretend you drop money on the floor just so you have $20 in your pocket and they say, did you drop something? He's deeply in love with his wife. I mean, deeply. His family, with all the pain and anguish that surrounded it, is his heart. But Joe Biden's character as a public servant is what drove him to make clear that the law applies to everyone. His decision not to pardon his son is not an expression of restraint or removal in any way from what his son has gone through and is continuing to go through, but of principle. Because the justice system that convicted his only surviving son is the same justice system he's vowed to protect. And if that doesn't tell you who Joe Biden is, I don't really know what does.
Several months later.
As you probably know by now, President Biden pardoned his son Hunter last night. And if you recall the president saying repeatedly over the last few months that he would not pardon his own son for months he's been saying that, you'd be correct. It was a commitment that was widely applauded for good reason, including by me. And last night, Joe Biden reversed course on that commitment. And if you're wondering whether that is good politics, if you're wondering if this is great for his legacy as someone who has consistently stood for principle over personal needs, who even kept the guy on in Delaware who was appointed by Trump, who was going to keep investigating his son, it's not good politics. And yes, Hunter Biden has done some stupid things. And yes, Hunter Biden has done some illegal things. He should not have lied about his drug use when filling out paperwork to register for a handgun. We all knew about his recovery from an addiction. He wrote an entire book about it. And of course, he should have paid his taxes in full and on time, as everyone should. My bet is Joe Biden knows that too. But he made his decision not as a politician. He made it as a dad. And by the way, his son is a private citizen. He's not a threat to our intelligence gathering, to our national intelligence, or to our law enforcement institutions. Joe Biden is going to be a private citizen in 50 days too. So tonight and moving forward, we're going to spend most of our time talking about the people who are and who may be. People like Kash Patel, who Trump tapped this weekend to lead the FBI. Now, there are lots of problems with that choice. First of all, he's unqualified.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, Jen Psaki glazed Joe Biden for not pardoning his son or committing to not pardon his son just to turn around and make excuses for him pardoning his son by saying, well, Trump bad. And, you know, Joe Biden, he's going to be a private citizen. Hunter Biden's going to be a private citizen. Who cares about all this stuff that I talked about before about Joe Biden being an example of a principled man who stands for the rule of law? You know, the optics aren't good, but Trump bad, right? Let's just move on past it, right? Let's not talk about it. It's not important. Amazing. This is the same woman that claims, hey, MSNBC, not a mouthpiece for the Democrat Party. You know, what's funny about this is that people like Jen Psaki get paid millions of dollars to give advice to Democrats, right? And then people wonder why they lose. It's because the Democrats are listening to people like her who are completely delusional and out of touch with basic reality, right? So, you know, I mean, it's just funny to me because Democrats are raging and they're asking questions about why they're losing. Why is it that nothing's working? Well, again, the first thing that Democrats need to acknowledge about themselves is the fact that they are delusional, right? That they're not in touch with the everyday, normal, common man. They're not, okay? That they believe that their ish don't stink and everybody can see that their ish stinks and it stinks a lot. And until Democrats acknowledge that, they're going to be lost, right? They're going to be 100% lost. Just as you guys saw with Jen Psaki, lost. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.